Everyone loved Jennifer Hayes. That was the problem. In her 3 years at Seattle Grace Hospital's intensive care unit, Jennifer had built a reputation that preceded her like a warm light. The most compassionate nurse on staff, colleagues said. The one who actually cared, not just did the job. The break room bulletin board was proof. Pinned among the shift schedules and medication updates were at least a dozen thank you cards addressed to her. Claire had read them during her first week while waiting for her coffee to brew. Jennifer stayed with my mother all night so she wouldn't be alone. She sang to her. I will never forget that kindness. In our darkest hour, Jennifer was a light. She made my father's passing peaceful. An angel in scrubs. We are forever grateful. Hospital administration loved her too. The ICU director had mentioned Jennifer specifically during Claire's orientation. You'll be working with some exceptional nurses. Jennifer Hayes volunteers for our sickest patients, takes the hardest shifts. She's the standard we aspire to. And it was true. Jennifer did volunteer for the patients nobody else wanted, the ones circling the drain, the complex cases, the families who were difficult or demanding or drowning in grief. She worked nights without complaint. She stayed late when she wasn't scheduled. She showed up early. She was always there when patients took their turn for the worse. Claire's first week in the ICU, she'd witnessed Jennifer with the Kowalski family after their 68-year-old father had died suddenly from a pulmonary embolism. The scene had been genuinely moving. Jennifer sat with the wife and 3 adult children in the family consultation room, holding the wife's hands, speaking in a voice so gentle it made Claire's throat tighten with empathy. He wasn't in pain at the end. I was with him. He was peaceful. I told him you loved him, and I swear he heard me. He knew. The wife had wept. Thank you. Thank you for being there. Claire had felt it too, the gratitude, the relief that someone had cared enough to be present. Jennifer seemed to truly care, seemed to carry each loss with genuine weight. But later, reviewing Mr. Kowalski's chart for a case study she was compiling, Claire noticed something. The patient had been stable at 2 p.m. when the day shift nurse had handed him off. Vitals normal. No signs of distress. By 6 p.m. he was dead. Something about the timeline felt off. But Claire was new, still learning, and pulmonary embolisms could be sudden. She dismissed the unease as inexperience. Week 2 brought another death. Martin Chen, 59, recovering from cardiac surgery. He'd been doing well, expected to transfer out of ICU within days. Then he crashed at 3 a.m. Dead by 4 a.m. Jennifer had been his nurse. Had been with him at the end. Claire started keeping an informal count in a small notebook she carried. Not because she suspected anything, just because she was trying to understand ICU mortality patterns, she told herself. Learning the rhythms of critical care. 12 days into her rotation, 6 deaths. Jennifer Hayes had been present for all 6. She's just dedicated, Claire murmured to herself while updating the count in the nurse's lounge. She volunteers for the sickest patients. Of course she's there more often. But the pattern continued. Day 14, another death. Jennifer present. Day 16, 2 deaths on the same shift. Jennifer present for both. Day 18, patient who'd been stable for 3 days suddenly deteriorated. Jennifer present. Claire closed her notebook and pressed her fingers against her eyes. She was being paranoid. Ridiculous. Jennifer Hayes was beloved for a reason. The thank you cards, the administrative praise, the families who requested her specifically, these weren't signs of something sinister. They were signs of a nurse who cared deeply. Weren't they? But that night, Claire pulled the 6-month mortality data anyway. And when she saw that Jennifer was present for 87% of deaths on her shifts, nearly 4 times higher than any other nurse, the unease she'd been dismissing solidified into something colder. Something that felt uncomfortably like certainty. Jennifer Hayes was holding Mrs. Patterson's hand when she died, and everyone said it was a blessing she'd been there. The family had gathered in the ICU bay at 9:47 p.m. after the rapid response team called them in. Mrs. Patterson, Dorothy, 73, admitted 2 days ago for pneumonia, had been stable all evening. Then suddenly she wasn't. Her blood pressure dropped, her breathing became labored, and within 40 minutes she was gone. But Jennifer had been there for all of it. She'd held Dorothy's hand through the final moments, whispering something the family couldn't hear but found comforting anyway. When it was over, Jennifer had embraced Dorothy's daughter, Karen, and said exactly the right thing: she wasn't alone. She knew you were here. She felt loved. Karen wept into Jennifer's shoulder. Thank God you were with her. Thank God she had you. The other family members echoed it. She always knows exactly what to say. She's an angel. We're so grateful. Jennifer accepted their thanks with humble grace, her own eyes glistening with tears. She'd been a nurse for 3 years, but she still felt every loss, you could see it in her face. Claire Morrison watched from the nurse's station, feeling the appropriate sadness for a life lost. It was her second week rotating through Seattle Grace's ICU as a new physician's assistant, and she was still learning the rhythms of the unit, the patterns of critical care. Later, after the family had left and the body had been moved, Claire pulled up Dorothy Patterson's chart. She scrolled through the nursing notes, the vital signs flow sheet, the evening assessments. 6 p.m., stable vitals, oxygen saturation good, patient resting comfortably. 7 p.m., no significant changes. 8 p.m., ate half of dinner, conversational with family. 9 p.m., rapid decline, emergency response called. 10 p.m., deceased. 4 hours from stable to dead. Claire mentioned it to Sarah Kim, one of the senior ICU nurses, while they were restocking a medication cart. Mrs. Patterson went downhill fast. Sarah glanced up, nodded. That happens sometimes in ICU. Patients turn on a dime. But it's lucky Jennifer was there, she always is. Sarah's tone was warm, admiring. I swear that woman has a sixth sense about these things. She's always with them at the end. Claire smiled politely and continued restocking. But the phrase stuck in her mind like a burr catching on fabric. She always is. That night, unable to sleep in her small apartment, Claire opened her laptop. She told herself she was just curious, just learning the unit's patterns, just trying to understand ICU mortality rates for her own education. She pulled 6 months of data from the hospital's mortality database, every death in the ICU, which nurse had been assigned to the patient, who'd been present at time of death. The numbers populated on her screen in neat columns. Jennifer Hayes had been present for 87% of the deaths that occurred during her shifts. Claire stared at the number. That seemed high. She ran the same analysis for the other ICU nurses. The next highest was 34%. Most hovered around 20 to 25%, which made sense. You'd naturally be present for some deaths of patients assigned to your care, but not most. Not nearly all. Claire closed her laptop and sat in the dark of her living room, listening to Seattle traffic humming outside. 87%. Jennifer was present for nearly every death that happened when she was working. She has a sixth sense, Sarah had said. Or, Claire thought with a chill that started in her stomach and spread outward, she has advanced knowledge. Because she's the one making it happen. Claire shook her head sharply, dismissing the thought as paranoid, absurd, the product of too little sleep and too much true crime television. But the number stayed with her. 87%. Some angels bring comfort to the dying. And some angels bring the dying itself. In a hospital ICU, where death is expected and grief makes families grateful for any kindness, it's almost impossible to tell the difference. Until someone starts counting. The numbers didn't lie. But everyone wanted them to. Claire spent 3 nights analyzing 6 months of ICU mortality data, cross-referencing patient outcomes with nursing assignments, shift schedules, and time of death records. She built spreadsheets, calculated percentages, ran the statistics twice to make sure she hadn't made an error. Jennifer Hayes's shift mortality rate was 3 times higher than her colleagues. Not slightly higher. 3 times. Claire knew she had to say something, but she also knew how it would sound. So she approached it casually, mentioned it to Linda Chen, the nursing supervisor, while they were both charting at the station during a quiet Tuesday afternoon. "Have you noticed Jennifer is present for a lot of deaths?" Claire kept her tone light, curious rather than accusatory. Linda looked up from her computer, her expression warm. "Well, she volunteers for the sickest patients. Takes the ones who are most likely to pass. She has a gift for end-of-life care. Families always say she makes the process more peaceful." "Right, but statistically." "Statistics don't capture compassion, Claire." Linda's smile was kind but dismissive. "Jennifer chooses to be with patients others avoid. That's not suspicious. That's dedication." Claire nodded and dropped it. But she didn't stop watching. Eduardo Rodriguez had been admitted after a stroke, 62 years old, a grandfather of 5. His first week in ICU had been rocky, but by week 2 he was improving steadily. Claire watched his vitals trend upward, blood pressure stabilizing, neurological function returning, family growing hopeful. Then Jennifer took 4 days of vacation. During those 4 days, Rodriguez continued improving. His speech therapy sessions went well. He squeezed his daughter's hand. The attending physician mentioned transferring him to a step-down unit. Jennifer returned to work on Thursday night. Rodriguez was assigned to her care. 3 hours into her shift, he crashed. Claire was working late, finishing charting, when she heard the code called from Bay 7. She arrived as the team was working on Rodriguez, chest compressions, medications, desperate measures that ultimately failed. He died at 3:47 a.m. Jennifer stood beside the bed, tears streaming down her face, one hand still resting on Rodriguez's cooling arm. When the family arrived, broken and confused, he'd been doing so well, what happened? Jennifer embraced them. "I'm so sorry." Sometimes they rally before the end. "But I was with him. He wasn't alone. I held his hand." "Thank God you were here," his daughter sobbed. "Thank God." Claire felt sick. That afternoon, she did something she knew crossed a line. She accessed the security footage from the ICU for the previous night. She told herself she was just checking, just ruling out the paranoid thoughts, just proving to herself that nothing unusual had happened. She watched Jennifer enter Rodriguez's room alone at 2:14 a.m. The angle didn't show what she was doing, just her figure moving to the bedside, standing there for several minutes, then leaving. At 2:31 a.m., alarms began sounding. Jennifer was the first to respond, rushing back into the room, immediately calling for help. She'd been in there 17 minutes before the code. Alone with a patient who'd been stable for days. A patient who started crashing exactly 17 minutes after she left his room. Claire replayed the footage 3 times. Jennifer's body language when she entered, calm, purposeful. When she exited, the same. When the alarms went off and she rushed back in, perfect shock, perfect devastation. Like an actress who knew her cues. Claire closed the video player and sat in the empty office, her hands trembling slightly. The unease she'd been carrying for 3 weeks crystallized into something harder. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't Jennifer having a gift for being present at death. This was Jennifer creating the deaths she was present for. Claire didn't know how yet. Didn't have proof beyond statistics and suspicious timing and a 17-minute window captured on grainy security footage. But she knew. Something was very, very wrong. And everyone who loved Jennifer Hayes was too close to see it. Claire spent the next week researching causes of sudden decline in ICU patients. She read case studies during her lunch breaks, searched medical databases late at night, trying to understand what could make a stable patient crash within hours. Hypoglycemia kept appearing in the literature. Dangerously low blood sugar could cause rapid deterioration, confusion, seizures, cardiac arrhythmias, death. And in critically ill patients, the symptoms could easily be mistaken for natural decline. She went back through the charts of recent deaths. Rodriguez, Patterson, Chen, Kowalski. 8 others from the past month. 8 of the 10 had documented hypoglycemic episodes in the hours before death. Claire pulled medication logs next, cross-referencing insulin administration against patient diagnoses. The ICU used more insulin than the patient population suggested it should. Not dramatically more, just enough to raise questions if anyone was looking. No one had been looking. She found 3 deaths where patients had received insulin despite having no diabetes, no medical indication for glucose management. The orders were labeled as stat corrections for high blood sugar, but when Claire checked the glucose readings that supposedly justified the insulin, they were normal. Someone had charted false readings to justify insulin administration. And toxicology screens weren't routinely run on deaths that appeared natural. Why would they be? These were ICU patients. Death was expected. Claire sat in the hospital library, staring at her laptop screen, feeling cold understanding settle over her. Insulin was the perfect murder weapon in a hospital. It caused symptoms indistinguishable from natural decline. It metabolized quickly, becoming nearly undetectable within hours. And nurses had easy, constant access to it: medication rooms, automated dispensing systems, emergency supply carts. A nurse could walk into a patient's room with a syringe of insulin, inject it into an IV line, and walk out. Within an hour, the patient would start showing signs of distress. Within 2 hours, they could be coding. Within 3, dead. And everyone would assume it was just the ICU being the ICU. Patients turn on a dime. That's what Sarah had said. Claire started photographing medication logs when the unit was quiet, using her phone to capture the supply room access records. Jennifer's ID badge appeared frequently, sometimes at 2 a.m., sometimes at 4 a.m., times when most nurses would only access supplies for immediate patient needs. Claire cross-referenced the access times with subsequent deaths. Medication room access at 2:14 a.m. Death at 3:47 a.m. Medication room access at 1:52 a.m. Death at 4:20 a.m. Medication room access at 11:37 p.m. Death at 2:15 a.m. The pattern held. 1 to 3 hours between Jennifer accessing the supply room and a patient coding. Then Claire found the notebook. It was left in the break room, tucked between a stack of nursing journals on the corner table. Claire almost didn't open it, it seemed personal, private. But the cover had Jennifer's initials embossed in the corner, and something made Claire flip it open. The first page had patient initials and dates. E.R., March 15th, peaceful, daughter held his hand, 2:47 a.m. D.P., 3 of 22, family very grateful, present for final moments. M.C., for halves, son said I was an angel, quiet passing. Claire's hand started shaking. She flipped forward. Page after page of entries. Patient initials. Dates. Brief notes about how the families reacted, what they said, how grateful they were. She flipped to the beginning of the notebook. The first entry was dated 3 years ago, just after Jennifer had started working at Seattle Grace. Claire counted the entries. 37. 37 patients. 37 deaths. 37 families who thanked Jennifer for being present at the end. She found Eduardo Rodriguez's entry near the end, E.R., May 18th, family very emotional, daughter said, thank God you were here, 3:47 a.m. Claire photographed every page with trembling hands, then carefully replaced the notebook exactly where she'd found it. She walked to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall, breathing slowly, trying not to throw up. 37 people. Jennifer Hayes had killed 37 people. And she'd kept a record of every one, like a diary of gratitude, a catalogue of moments when grieving families had called her an angel. Claire had found the pattern. She'd found the weapon. And now she had to find someone who would believe her. Claire requested a meeting with Linda Chen, the nursing supervisor, and came prepared with printed spreadsheets, photographed medication logs, and copies of the notebook pages. She laid it all out on Linda's desk. The statistical analysis showing Jennifer present for 87% of deaths. The medication discrepancies showing unexplained insulin usage. The timeline correlating supply room access with patient codes. The notebook with 37 entries spanning 3 years. Linda's face hardened as she looked at the evidence. Not with concern. With anger. "Jennifer is our best nurse," Linda said, her voice cold. "This is absurd, Claire. You're making serious accusations based on what? Statistics? A personal notebook that could mean anything? The insulin usage alone means nothing without context. ICU patients have complex needs. Jennifer manages our sickest cases." Linda pushed the papers back across the desk. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but these are unfounded attacks on a colleague who has served this hospital with distinction for 3 years." Claire felt her face flush. "I'm not attacking anyone. I'm presenting evidence. Evidence of paranoia." Linda leaned forward. "Let me be clear. If you continue spreading these accusations, it will be reflected in your evaluation. You're new here. You don't understand ICU dynamics yet. Don't destroy your career over a conspiracy theory." The meeting ended with Claire's evidence returned to her and a warning that felt like a threat. She went higher. Dr. Michael Reeves, the chief medical officer, was more receptive. He listened to her presentation without interrupting, reviewed her documentation with increasingly grave expressions, and finally sat back in his chair with a long exhale. "This is explosive," he said quietly. "If you're right, we're talking about serial murder. If you're wrong, we destroy an innocent woman's life and open ourselves to massive litigation." "I know. That's why I brought it to you. We need absolute proof before we act." Reeves stood, began pacing. "I'll initiate a quiet internal investigation. Medical records review, medication audits, security footage analysis. But Claire, you cannot discuss this with anyone. Not colleagues, not friends. If word gets out prematurely, we lose any chance of building a case." Claire agreed. It was progress. Someone with authority was finally listening. 2 weeks later, she asked Reeves for an update. "The investigation is ongoing," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "These things take time." But Claire could read between the lines. Hospital lawyers were involved now, she'd heard through administrative gossip. They were worried about liability. If Seattle Grace accused Jennifer Hayes and couldn't prove it, the lawsuits would be catastrophic. Better to move slowly, carefully, with absolute certainty. Meanwhile, patients kept dying. Except they didn't. Claire noticed the change immediately. Deaths in the ICU dropped. Not to zero, this was still intensive care, but the sudden, unexplained crashes stopped. Patients who would have fit Jennifer's pattern stayed stable, improved, transferred out. Jennifer herself seemed different. More careful. She still worked her shifts, still provided excellent care, but something had shifted. The way she looked at Claire in the hallways felt weighted, aware. She knew. Somehow, despite Reeves's assurances of confidentiality, Jennifer knew she was being watched. Claire felt sick with the realization. She'd tipped their hand. Jennifer had gone dormant, waiting for the investigation to conclude with nothing concrete, waiting for everyone to decide Claire was paranoid. And then, when the attention faded, Jennifer would resume. More careful this time. More strategic. Impossible to catch. Claire had found the pattern, found the weapon, found the evidence. And the system designed to protect patients had protected the killer instead. 3 weeks became 4, then 5. The investigation dragged. Death stayed low. Jennifer stayed careful. And Claire stayed awake at night, knowing that every day of bureaucratic caution was another day a serial killer walked free through Seattle Grace Hospital, waiting for her moment to kill again. Jennifer began her campaign so subtly that Claire almost didn't notice at first. It started in the weekly ICU staff meeting. Jennifer raised her hand during the clinical case review and said, with perfect concern in her voice, "I'm a little worried about some of the clinical decisions I've been seeing from our newer staff. No names, but I think we need to provide more oversight for the PAs who are still learning ICU protocols." Claire felt eyes shift toward her. She was the only new PA on the unit. The next week, Jennifer was more direct. "I'm concerned about Claire's decision-making. Yesterday she ordered a medication without checking the patient's renal function first. I caught it before administration, but it could have been dangerous." Claire's stomach dropped. She had checked the renal function. She had the note in the chart to prove it. But by the time she opened her mouth to defend herself, the meeting had moved on. Jennifer started suggesting, in careful words that sounded like compassion, that Claire seemed overwhelmed and might be making errors due to stress. Other staff began noticing, or thought they were noticing. "She does seem stressed lately," Sarah Kim mentioned to another nurse within Claire's earshot. "Maybe the ICU is too much for her." Claire realized with cold clarity what was happening. Jennifer was systematically destroying her credibility. Every patient care decision Claire made was suddenly second-guessed. When she ordered a medication, Jennifer would helpfully double-check the dosage in front of the attending physician. When Claire interpreted a lab result, Jennifer would suggest an alternative reading, her tone always supportive, always concerned. "I just want to make sure we're being thorough," Jennifer would say with a kind smile. Claire's still learning. The corrections were small, often unnecessary, but they accumulated. Claire's 3-month evaluation reflected the concerns, needs improvement in clinical confidence and requires additional oversight for complex decision-making. Meanwhile, the deaths resumed. Not at the previous rate. Jennifer was being strategic now, careful. 1 death every 10 days instead of every 3. Always different enough in presentation that patterns were harder to establish. Always with perfect documentation showing medical justification. Claire documented everything in a private file she kept at home. But at work, she felt increasingly isolated. Colleagues who'd been friendly now kept their distance. The other PAs stopped inviting her to lunch. She'd become the problem, the weak link, the one everyone had to watch. Jennifer, meanwhile, appeared nothing but supportive in public. "Claire is going through a difficult time," she told the staff during a break room conversation Claire accidentally overheard. "We should be understanding. Starting in the ICU is hard, and I think she's feeling the pressure. Let's make sure we're there for her." The words were perfect. Compassionate. Concerned. They made Claire sound unstable. It was masterful manipulation. Jennifer had turned Claire's accusation into evidence of Claire's own incompetence. If Claire pushed harder, insisted Jennifer was a killer, she'd sound paranoid, desperate, mentally unwell. And who would believe the unstable new PA over the beloved nurse who'd been nothing but supportive? Claire stood in the supply room one night, alone, staring at the insulin vials that Jennifer accessed with such careful timing. She thought about the 37 entries in the notebook. The families who'd been grateful. The patients who'd died thinking Jennifer cared. She thought about how perfectly Jennifer had positioned herself, as the compassionate nurse and Claire as the struggling newcomer. Claire had the evidence. But evidence meant nothing if no one would listen. And Jennifer had made absolutely certain that when Claire spoke, no one would believe a word she said. Rebecca Chen was admitted to the ICU at 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday following complications from emergency gallbladder surgery. 34 years old, mother of 3 children under age 8, her chart showed stable vitals and a good prognosis. The surgery had gone well. She just needed monitoring overnight, maybe 48 hours in ICU before stepping down. Claire was reviewing Rebecca's intake notes when she heard Jennifer's voice at the nurse's station. "I heard about the new admission. I know I'm not on tonight, but I'll come in. I want to make sure she's okay." Claire's head snapped up. Jennifer wasn't scheduled. She'd finished her shift at 7 p.m. She should be going home. Instead, she was volunteering to work. Every alarm bell Claire had been carrying for 6 weeks started screaming at once. She watched Jennifer head toward Rebecca's room. 10 minutes later, Jennifer emerged with Rebecca's husband, Tom, speaking in that gentle voice Claire had come to recognize. The voice that bonded, that comforted, that made families feel seen. "I'll personally make sure she's comfortable tonight," Jennifer was saying. "I know this is scary, but she's in good hands. I'll check on her every hour." Tom Chen's eyes were grateful. "Thank you. That means so much." Claire pulled Rebecca's chart again. Stable vitals. Blood pressure good. No complications. Expected recovery time, 2 to 3 days. The kind of patient who should improve, not decline. The kind of patient Jennifer selected. Healthy enough that death would seem like bad luck, not medical certainty. Vulnerable enough to be in ICU. With a family desperate for reassurance, for someone who cared. Claire recognized the pattern like a familiar nightmare. Jennifer was choosing Rebecca Chen. Claire grabbed her phone and called Dr. Reeves's office. He answered on the third ring, his voice tired. "The investigation needs to move now," Claire said without preamble. "Jennifer just volunteered for an off shift. There's a patient, Rebecca Chen, 34, stable, good prognosis. Jennifer is selecting her." "Claire, we've talked about this. We don't have enough concrete evidence yet. You need to give the investigation time. She's going to kill someone tonight." A pause. Then Reeves's voice, firm and final, "You can't know that. You're making assumptions based on pattern recognition, not proof. I need you to stand down. Do not interfere with patient care. Do not confront Jennifer. Let the investigation proceed." "Dr. Reeves." "Stand down, Claire. That's an order." The line went dead. Claire stood in the empty consultation room, phone still pressed to her ear, and realized with perfect clarity that official channels were going to fail. The investigation would take weeks, maybe months. Rebecca Chen didn't have months. She had hours. Claire had one choice. She could go home, follow orders, let the bureaucracy grind forward while a woman with 3 young children died because no one with authority would act fast enough. Or she could stay. Stay overnight. Watch Jennifer. Document whatever happened. And if Jennifer moved toward Rebecca's room with a syringe, physically intervene. If Claire was wrong, if Jennifer worked the shift without incident, if Rebecca remained stable, if Claire's suspicions were just paranoia, her career was over. She'd be fired for insubordination, possibly reported to the medical board, definitely blacklisted from every hospital in Seattle. If Claire was right and did nothing, Rebecca Chen would be dead by morning. And 3 children would grow up without their mother because Claire had chosen professional safety over moral action. She thought about the notebook. 37 entries. 37 families who'd thanked Jennifer for being present. 37 people who'd died because everyone around Jennifer had chosen to believe the best instead of investigating the evidence. Claire wasn't going to be the 38th person to regret. She texted her roommate that she'd be home late. She bought terrible coffee from the vending machine. She found an empty on-call room with a view of the ICU nurses' station. And she settled in to watch Jennifer Hayes work the night shift. If her career ended tonight, so be it. At least Rebecca Chen's children would still have their mother. Claire positioned herself in the supply room directly across from Rebecca Chen's ICU bay. Through the narrow window in the door, she had a clear view of the room. The lights were dimmed for night. Rebecca slept peacefully, monitors showing steady vitals. The ICU was quiet at 2:47 a.m. The night shift ran with minimal staff, 2 nurses, 1 resident sleeping in the on-call room, and Jennifer Hayes moving through her rounds with practiced efficiency. Claire watched Jennifer check on other patients first. Professional. Thorough. Exactly what a good nurse should do. Then Jennifer walked to the medication room. Emerged 2 minutes later with something palmed in her hand. And headed toward Rebecca Chen's room. Claire's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. This was it. Either she was about to witness a murder, or she was about to destroy an innocent nurse's career based on paranoid obsession. Jennifer paused at Rebecca's doorway, checked the hallway in both directions. The gesture was casual, reflexive, but it sent ice through Claire's veins. Jennifer entered the room. Through the window, Claire watched her approach Rebecca's bedside. Watched her check the 4-line. Watched her produce a syringe from her pocket. Watched her inject something into the 4-port. Rebecca's monitors remained steady for 30 seconds. 45 seconds. 1 minute. Then the alarms began. Blood sugar dropping. Heart rate spiking. Blood pressure plummeting. Jennifer stepped calmly into the hallway and called out, her voice perfectly measured, "I need help in here." Patient's coding. Claire burst from the supply room and ran. She entered Rebecca's bay as Jennifer turned, surprise flashing across her face before transforming into something harder. Claire went straight to the 4-line and pulled it, disconnecting it from Rebecca's arm. "What are you doing?" Jennifer's voice was sharp. "She needs treatment." Claire's hands were shaking, but she moved with purpose, checking Rebecca's rapidly declining vitals, then scanning the floor. There, the syringe Jennifer had dropped when Claire entered. Claire picked it up, read the label. Insulin. 100 units. A massive, lethal overdose for a non-diabetic patient. The code team was arriving, residents and nurses flooding in. Claire was already drawing up glucose, administering it as an antidote, her medical training overriding her terror. "Security," Claire called out, her voice surprisingly steady. "Call security. Now." Jennifer's face underwent a transformation Claire would remember for the rest of her life. Shock melted into rage, then shifted into something calculated and cold. "What are you doing?" Jennifer repeated, but her tone had changed. "She needs treatment." "She needs treatment for insulin poisoning," Claire said, holding up the syringe. 100 units. "She's not diabetic." The code team hesitated, looking between them. Security arrived. Claire handed them the syringe. "This nurse just injected this patient with a lethal dose of insulin. I witnessed it. Call the police." And that's when Jennifer's mask dropped completely. "You have no idea what you've done," she said quietly, her voice stripped of all warmth. "These people were dying anyway. I gave them peace. I was there for them when nobody else was. I held their hands. I made their families feel better." The room went silent. "I was there," Jennifer continued, even as security moved toward her. "Every single time. I was the last person they saw. I gave them that gift." Security took her arms. She didn't resist, just kept talking. 37 people, and I was there for all of them. Their families were grateful. You read the cards. Everyone loved me. They walked her out in handcuffs, still talking, still justifying, still believing she'd been providing mercy. Rebecca Chen's vitals stabilized. The glucose was working. She'd survive. Claire stood in the hallway outside the ICU, her hands finally shaking now that the crisis had passed, and felt the weight of what she knew settle over her like a physical thing. She'd been right. And 37 people had died before she could prove it. 37 families who'd written thank you cards to their loved one's killer. 37 deaths that could have been prevented if someone, anyone, had been willing to look at the numbers instead of the compassionate performance. Claire had stopped number 38. But she'd carry the other 37 for the rest of her life. Jennifer Hayes was arrested at 3:14 a.m. and held without bail. By morning, Seattle Grace Hospital had initiated a full investigation into every death that occurred during her 3-year employment. The scope was staggering. 37 suspected victims. Families were contacted. Exhumation orders were filed. Toxicology tests were run on bodies that had been buried months or years earlier, testing for substances that metabolize quickly but leave traces in tissue. 23 cases came back positive for lethal levels of insulin. When police searched Jennifer's apartment, they found the notebook Claire had photographed. But this wasn't the only record Jennifer had kept. There was a box in her closet containing mementos, a hospital bracelet, a daughter's thank you card, a photo of a patient's family embracing Jennifer at a funeral. Trophies. The families were devastated in ways grief counselors struggled to address. They'd already mourned their loved ones. Now they had to mourn again, this time knowing their gratitude had been directed at a murderer. The thank you cards they'd written haunted them. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Jennifer pleaded not guilty, claiming she'd been providing comfort care to suffering patients. Her defense argued that she was a compassionate nurse who'd made difficult end-of-life decisions, not a murderer. The prosecution presented the statistical evidence, the insulin findings, the notebook, and the security footage from Rebecca Chen's near-death. Claire testified for 2 days. She walked the jury through her investigation, the mortality patterns, the medication discrepancies, the timeline she'd built. She described watching Jennifer inject Rebecca with insulin. She held up the syringe that contained 100 units. Jennifer Hayes was convicted on 18 counts of first-degree murder, the cases where physical evidence was conclusive. She was suspected in 19 additional deaths where evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Life without parole. Seattle Grace Hospital settled civil lawsuits with victims' families for undisclosed amounts. Dr. Reeves resigned. The hospital implemented new protocols, mandatory statistical monitoring of mortality rates, nurse verification for high-risk medications, automated flagging of unusual patterns. Claire Morrison left clinical practice and became a patient safety advocate. 2 years later, she stood in her office at the Patient Safety Institute, reviewing the dashboard of the AI system she'd developed. It monitored mortality data from 847 hospitals across the country, looking for the statistical anomalies that humans missed or dismissed. Seattle Grace's ICU mortality rate had dropped 27% since Jennifer's arrest. The number that should have been normal all along. Claire's system had flagged 3 other suspected cases nationally. 2 were under investigation. One had already resulted in an arrest, a respiratory therapist in Ohio with a suspicious pattern of ventilator failures. Her computer chimed. New email. The subject line read, "We wrote her a thank you card." Claire opened it. The message was from Margaret Torres, whose husband had died 3 years ago during Jennifer's first month in the ICU. Jennifer's first victim. *, we wrote her a glowing card. We told her she was an angel. How do we grieve all over again? How do we trust hospitals again? How do we forgive ourselves for thanking our husband's killer? *. Claire closed her eyes briefly, then replied with an invitation to the victim's family support group she facilitated monthly. That evening, 15 people gathered in a community center meeting room. Spouses. Children. Parents. All connected by the same terrible knowledge that Jennifer Hayes had killed their loved ones and they'd been grateful. Claire didn't offer platitudes. She'd learned that these families didn't need false comfort. Your grief was real, she said. Your gratitude was real. She manipulated all of us, that's what predators do. They find our vulnerabilities and exploit them. But the love you felt for your family member, the memories you shared with them before that night, she can't take those. They're still yours. A woman in the back raised her hand. Does it get easier? No, Claire said honestly. But it gets bearable. And by coming here, by helping us identify warning signs, you're protecting future patients. That matters. After the meeting, Claire returned to her office. Her AI system had sent an alert, a cardiac unit nurse in Portland with concerning patterns. Death rate 2.8 times higher than colleagues. Frequent presence at unexpected codes. Pattern held over 14 months. Claire picked up her phone and called Portland Medical Center's patient safety officer. This is Dr. Claire Morrison from the Patient Safety Institute. I need you to look at something. And I need you to take it seriously even though this person is probably beloved by families and colleagues. Especially because of that. She sent the data. Explained the patterns. Walked them through what to look for. The work never ended. Somewhere, another Jennifer Hayes was working a shift, selecting victims, hiding behind compassion. Statistics said there were probably 40 more like her working in American hospitals right now. But Claire would keep looking. Keep flagging. Keep calling. Jennifer Hayes had killed 37 people by hiding behind compassion. She'd taught Claire that the most dangerous predators wear the mask of caregivers. They exploit our trust, our grief, our desperate need to believe someone cares. Claire couldn't save Jennifer's victims. But she could make sure the next Jennifer Hayes didn't get to 37. She could make sure she didn't get past 3. That wasn't redemption. It was just math. And in hospitals, math saves lives. Claire pulled up the Portland case file, reviewed the flagged patterns one more time, and reached for her phone. Another call to make. Another pattern to investigate. Another potential killer to stop. The work never ended. But neither did she.